Rick Stengel, big difference between Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump in the reaction to Russian interference in the campaign.
Yes, Bernie was very strong and forthright, spoke to camera, addressing it to Vladimir Putin, as you mentioned in the introduction. Donald Trump has never done that, has never acknowledged it. It's a little unclear what Russia is doing on behalf of Bernie Sanders. In 2016, it was clear. They were anti-Hillary. They were trying to subvert her campaign, so they were supporting Bernie. Why they're supporting him now is not clear. Maybe, as Bernie points out, which they do try to sow discord, and a campaign between Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders might sow as much discord as we've ever seen in a presidential election. It's unclear why they're doing it.
Mika Ouyang, Bernie Sanders said everything today about this that Donald Trump has refused to say.
That's right. He made very clear that he's not interested in Russian help here. And I think it's really important to understand the ways in which Russia has tried to help Donald Trump and try to understand whether or not they're going to bring any of those tactics to bear on behalf of Bernie Sanders. Right? We know the Russians have tried to use straw donors to funnel money into the Trump campaign through various surrogates. Are they trying to funnel money through grassroots online portals that are hard to track into the Bernie Sanders campaign? We know that the Russians were trying to amplify certain kinds of messages on social media on behalf of Donald Trump. Are they trying to do that on behalf of Bernie Sanders? We don't know. And we know that they hacked and provided opposition research on behalf of Donald Trump and put it out there into the media. Would they do that to boost Bernie Sanders in this primary by trying to take down his more moderate primary opponents?
Joyce Vance, the Bernie Sanders said it was about a month ago when he was told this, roughly the same time frame where it started to become public that William Barr, Attorney General, has declared that any consideration of any version of any investigation of anything involving a presidential campaign must go through him. He must okay every step of it. Any possible linkage there?
Well, it's hard to know what's going on at this point, Lawrence. The timeline overall has a lot of, I think, coincidences that we'll only understand the full value of in hindsight. But the important takeaway, I think, from this is that what the president is doing is trying to destroy many of the institutions that contribute to our national security. And instead of looking at the Justice Department and the intelligence community in isolation, which has been, I think, what we've done up until now, we need to begin to look at these as one timeline of occurrences. And the president tries to weaken DOJ, tries to weaken the intelligence community. There's no more speaking truth to power. Instead, there's just Trump insisting he hear only facts and a narrative that suit him. That's dangerous for our country.
Thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on the button below for more from The Last Word and the rest of MSNBC.